horror and Marvel. Now this is my jam because I love both those things. We are talking Werewolf by Night, which is a special presentation, Halloween special by Marvel on Disney Plus. And this one is directed by Michael Giacchino, who is primarily known as a composer, making his directorial debut. And this one stars Gael, García, Bernal as Jack Russell. Yes, that's the character's real name, who is the aforementioned Werewolf by Night. This is actually based on a real comic. I was never a huge fan of Werewolf by Night, but I am a huge fan of ManThing, who also appears in this this holiday special. Now, what is the story? It focuses on the Bloodstone family, really, and Ulysses Bloodstone, who was the kind of the patriarch of this family, a famous kind of monster hunting family, has died, and he is giving his MacGuffin, this bloodstone, which is this kind of magical pendant which gives the wearer powers, to the hunter that can prove himself hunting a particular kind of monster. This includes a variety of hunters. It includes his daughter Elsa Bloodstone, who is somewhat estranged, and we get Jack Russell posing as a kind of a monster hunter to try and get in there for his own reasons. And they are, of course, hunting ManThing. But we soon learn that there may well be another monster around as well. What will happen? You have to watch this movie, I guess, it's a short movie, to find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this one. I was actually quite looking forward to this. I knew ManThing was going to be in it. And I was excited to see him because he's only ever had one on-screen appearance in live action before, which is the 2005 movie, which I wonder now if that will get a kind of Blu-ray release, because it has never had one. And that one was a low-budget kind of sci-fi director, kind of sci-fi channel movie. So I was excited to see ManThing, and of course Werewolf by Night's never been on screen in live action form. Yeah, and obviously this is kind of carving out a kind of a different kind of genre to the kind of the Marvel kind of mythos. I mean, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was originally supposed to be Marvel's kind of horror entry, but it really didn't kind of materialise. But I do think this one does. I do think this one does actually fit into a horror movie. It's styled after the kind of the black and white, you know, kind of Universal monster kind of style movies in some ways. We have a great kind of intro that will kind of harken back to that. And it does have this kind of like really great kind of atmosphere in it. I think they do a great job here of, I mean, it's somewhat campy, but you know, they do a great job of really kind of giving you this this old school kind of cinema feel to it in some degrees, but still keeping it kind of modern. So I really liked it here. And I have to say the biggest asset for me with this movie is the production value here, because it really does kind of feel like a unique and fresh take. Giacchino, as I mentioned, is first-time director, but quite an established composer, so I do suppose he has some clout. And him and his cinematography team, I think, do a great job of really kind of giving you a very kind of unique-looking and fresh take for a Marvel property, certainly, and you know, it will harken back to as I say, the horror cinema of old, but still feel kind of contemporary at the same time. But there's some wonderful kind of use of lighting, atmospheric kind of sets and things like this to really kind of sell you on this fantastically produced special. I really kind of did enjoy that. I think the decision here to have a kind of a short film, ultimately, it runs about 50 odd minutes, I think was probably the smart move. Had this been a feature, I don't know if it would have, you know, had enough kind of like fuel in the tank. I would have thought they would have had to have a little bit more, you know. But I think having this kind of like this one-off was the perfect kind of setup, really, because ultimately the character of Jack Russell, who the Werewolf by Night, his character is interesting, I think, but the actual werewolf is just a feral beast, really. So it kind of, you know, doesn't really have like a personality exactly. So I think it was the kind of the right choice here, at least for this kind of introduction, until maybe his character is potentially somewhat evolved later on. I think let's just call it the movie, is surprisingly gory for a Disney movie. You know, the decision here to have it in black and white, I think, was clearly the wise one, because they were able to kind of get away with some quite brutal kills, to be honest with you. And we do actually see a fair amount of kind of blood getting splattered out from kind of victims, which we really haven't seen in the kind of the Marvel films, outside of things like the kind of like Logan and stuff like that, the kind of the non-Disney kind of Marvel films. This is the first one where we really do see some actual kind of little bit of kind of gore here, really, I have to say, and I think it's all the better for it. ManThing is, as I say, when I was growing up, I used to read ManThing comics, one of my favourite kind of characters, and they've got the look down pat here. I mean, if you look at, again, the 2005 movie, that really kind of had some kind of differences, albeit ManThing was probably more accurate to his actual comic character in that movie than he is here, because they treat ManThing like he's somewhat kind of sentient, which he really isn't in the comics, to be honest. He is just a kind of like lumbering kind of like creature without really any forward kind of thinking. He just reacts to emotion in the kind of the comics. It's somewhat like in a way like an inverse Hulk. Hulk is the embodiment of kind of like rage and anger, whilst ManThing was a scientist called Ted Sallis who you know, was trying to kind of do various experiments and ended up kind of bonding with a swamp, and is just a kind of shambling mass who just kind of is affected by people's emotions, particularly kind of fear, and that's kind of his thing. But he's kind of different here, to be honest with you. He seems like more like a kind of a Groot style character, but who maybe is a little bit more brutal. Still, I'd kind of like to see Groot and Man-Thing interact in this universe. It would be quite fun. But he looks fantastic. And I got to say as well, I actually quite liked the werewolf effects as well. Now, I was never, as I say, I was never a massive fan of Werewolf by Night in the comics, because I always preferred the aesthetic of like Man-Wolf. But I do think actually they have that kind of classic kind of werewolf sort of styling of more of a wolfman rather than a werewolf. And, you know, but it's kind of modernising it to still make him look kind of quite cool, like the makeup effects. I think the cast did a good job here. Again, it feels only tangentially related to Marvel. There's a little bit of goofy humour here and there, but I do feel it stands on its own. You know, and the cast do a decent enough job here, particularly Gael García Bernal, who plays Jack Russell. I think is very seems like a very kind of accommodating kind of character, and you kind of instantly kind of like him. But I think all here do a pretty good job, albeit some of them don't really have a kind of a lot of lines. There's some pretty good action and some fairly good kind of good kills in this special as well. What didn't work for me, as I've kind of mentioned, I think Man-Thing is a little bit kind of like changed. I mean, people might not care, but as I am a kind of you know, Man-Thing is one of my more favourite characters. You know, I prefer him to be more comics accurate, but at least he looks like the character, but you know, personality-wise, he didn't have one before, so I can understand that change. But he is a little bit different. The only thing I would say, this is kind of called Werewolf by Night, but it's kind of more about Elsa Bloodstone, to be honest. She, to me, was the main character rather than kind of Jack Russell. She seems to get a lot more to do, and she has a little bit more of an arc, I think, and gets more of the kind of the action and stuff. We actually don't see all that much of the aforementioned werewolf. I mean, when we do, I think it's done well, but I think the actual werewolf is a little bit underutilised, unfortunately. I mean, he gets a kind of a few kills, but I think he needed a little bit more of a particular kind of antagonist to go against, because he just kind of takes out bunch of foot soldiers, really. You don't really feel like he's the main character. Elsa Bloodstone seems like the main character, and she has the most interaction with our antagonists, but Werewolf by Night is kind of more of a henchman kind of killer. So that was kind of, you know, an odd choice, considering this is meant to be his kind of movie, so to speak. Some of the kind of, it may be a little bit too camp for some. It does border on a little bit of campy, and it can't help doing some of these kind of Marvel jokes once in a while. And I do think it kind of, the story is relatively lean. I mean, I guess it's a 50-minute kind of thing, so it can't be too, you know, twisty and stuff. But it's a relatively kind of straightforward kind of story without much in regards to kind of like kind of surprises and things like that, and that, you know, but it's still a, you know, it's a lean kind of story. I think it, you know, had it been a feature, they may well have added some more elements to that. So, but overall, I gotta say, I really enjoyed this special. I think it really captured a great kind of mix between kind of horror and Marvel. I think it was kind of like the visually speaking, it's astounding to look at. Really a triumph, I think, in directorial flourishes, and certainly a great start to Giacchino's directorial kind of debut. And I think, you know, it's a solid start for all of these kind of characters as well. I do hope that Marvel do continue with more of the horror aesthetic. I do think it's a kind of an area where they could, you know, push back on some of the kind of the criticisms that maybe the Marvel have had in kind of Phase 4. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic to kind of see a decent kind of looking ManThing on screen, and yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.